Hello, hello. Happy Thursday, everybody.
Hello. Good to be live with you today on this lovely Thursday. Or if you're watching this later and it's not Thursday, it's good to be with you still.
Whatever day it is. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the idea of building clarity within your business and kind of the different components that go into that, maybe what's standing in our way when it comes to clarity. And as you're joining us, throw comments, questions into the chat. We'll bring stuff on screen, interact with you. The whole point of going live is that we know that you're there and having a conversation with you. So I guess to get us started, James, one of the things that I think is really important, like when we talk about clarity and internal leadership, what do you think causes so much of the misalignment that we see within companies today?
Yeah, a couple things come to mind. Number one is that change is happening. Surprise, surprise. And with all of that change that happens, businesses and the leadership within those businesses do not keep up with it. And they panic and they start reacting and they lose sight of that vision for their business. And all of a sudden they look up and they kind of forgot why the business even exists in the first place. And they're just responding to the market forces around them. So I'd say that's probably the case for majority of businesses that lose sight of things is they become reactionary to the market and the things happening around them instead of having a proactive vision for where they want to take their business and using that to build clarity.
So I think you and I talk about this a lot, and I actually just made a video about it that's on like Instagram, TikTok, be coming to YouTube here shortly as well. And it is like this idea of kind of how often people that are supposed to be in leadership roles actually end up kind of falling into this follower capacity. And you just kind of hit on that idea there when you were talking about the idea of like reaction. When you all you were doing is like looking at the market and looking at what big consulting companies are telling you or software sales executives are saying or whatever, and you're doing this like highly reactive decision making, you're just falling back into the role of being a follower as opposed to a leader. So what are some suggestions that you have for people when it comes to kind of stepping out of that role of following and actually becoming a leader?
Yeah, I mean, I just did an email newsletter about it this week, and that is go back to your customer, right? Who is your customer? What problem are they facing? And how are you going to solve it? That is probably the most important thing for every business to understand is that your customer and their problems and how you solve their problems is the purpose of your business. And everything you do within your business, from the sales to the marketing to your operations to how your accounting team functions, how your HR team hires for candidates and looks at different people and skill sets, all of that comes back to are you serving your customers and are you helping them make the change that they're trying to make in their lives, right? They're at point A in their life or their business. They want to get to point B and they hire you to make that happen. And I think that's the most important thing that every business leader should do is just go back to saying, who is my customer? What problem do they have? And why do we exist to help solve that problem? If you can articulate that in like one or two sentences, your entire team can know it. And then you can kind of start, going down and marching to the same drum, which allows you to, build that clarity and build that purpose. So that's how I see the most effective way of doing it. Obviously, things like shiny objects and FOMO can get in the way of that. So you've had a lot more experience, obviously, seeing more of the FOMO side of things, being software sales. So maybe you can enlighten us on that.
Well, I think when it comes to like that fear of missing out mentality, when you look at like individuals having it, a lot of it comes from this like insecurity or like need to be involved in everything so that they don't feel like they're getting left out, that they're not going to be left behind. And I think every salesperson and every company has figured out that that feeling of FOMO is actually one of the most valuable sales tactics that people can bring forward. And so when you look at like what's sold more software than anything else in the world, it is this idea of FOMO. And it's really, really easy to hear you need to buy this software solution or implement this tool or bring in agile methodology, or you name whatever the big shiny fad thing is at that moment. You need to do it right this moment or you will no longer be in business. That gets people to start like reacting, like you were talking about, and not thinking about long-term strategy, not thinking about intentionality, not thinking about their customers. They just start to panic and they need to kind of like move into this role of like, gotta act, gotta do now, as opposed to stopping and thinking about like, okay, what are we here as a business to do? How can we use tools that are most effective? The heck is going on here? We're talking about clarity in business. If you don't like it, get the hell out. But when we're like taking a look at that idea of like FOMO, what happens is like once that fear is situated and people aren't comfortable in what they are trying to accomplish from a business perspective, and people aren't like secure in the direction that they're bringing their company, they make those choices to start going out and looking for shiny objects or the solutions or purchasing stuff without really understanding why they're doing it. And they bring in solutions that are not there to solve a specific problem, but it's like shiny objects that are there in order to search for a problem. And then you bring those things in, and it either pisses off your customers, like we're seeing happen all over the place with AI right now, or it pisses off your employees because they're being asked to do things that they don't understand the why behind, that they don't feel like are actually helping them accomplish their goals or help serve the customer. And then you end up not getting any sort of return on these things. And instead of leading your company into like a better position or helping your customers, you end up just following whatever that marketing language is or falling into that reaction trap and not accomplishing the goals that you set out for in the first place.
Yeah, fear sells. When people are spooked and they feel like they are missing out on some sort of trend, or they feel like they're going to lose something within their business, that is how people sell to them. And I think that's something that I've seen leadership in many businesses fall victim to, is they have this fear that if they don't do something, it's going to be catastrophic for their business. Instead of thinking, hey, how am I better serving my customers? How am I adopting technology? How am I improving my sales process? How am I, building our authority online to help us become a trusted resource for our audience? They just react more from that fear side of things. So that's ultimately what it comes down to, right? Is like this fear is like a killer for business. If you're in business and you're in any kind of leadership position, if you let your fear that something's going to go wrong drive your decisions for how you're doing things, you are going to make so many mistakes and go totally off course for what you're trying to do. Instead of saying, okay, I'm putting my blinders on, this is my vision for the future, here's how I'm going to serve my customers, what can I do to better serve them? That is how you actually grow. I think that this is where the FOMO comes in. And the FOMO works because it sells, and businesses can be sold to if they get afraid of things. So that's a major distraction for clarity.
Earlier, you said something that I want to come back to, and it was the idea of how like you end up reacting until like, unless you are spending time yourself, like really learning about tools that are becoming emerging and like kind of continuing your own learning journey. Can you talk a little bit about how staying up to date and exposing yourself to new things can help with this clarity side of things?
Yeah, well, I think you can't put your head in the sand, and you can't just not be aware of trends that are happening in your industry, outside of your industry. I think oftentimes the best businesses are the ones that are pulling from inspiration and innovation in other industries and bringing it into their industry and use it to serve their customers. So it's not a matter of putting your head in the sand and ignoring things that are happening. It is not reacting to everything. And so I think part of that comes down to being someone who has that digital literacy and sees trends that are happening, learns about them. And that way you're not in this like shock mode. And for sure, some of the most effective business leaders I know are just like insanely curious people, and they have their hands in tons of different things. And they're willing to experiment on things. They're willing to like try things and look at things quickly, but they don't like go all in on something based on fear and FOMO. It's more one of those things where it's like, oh, like, yeah, let's check that out. They vet things, they move on, they move quickly. And then the next time something comes up like that, they've already kind of got an idea of what's going on. So I know it's kind of a vague thing, but I truly think it's one of those things where it's just a matter of being someone who's curious to the point where you're learning and building that digital literacy, so you don't fall victim to FOMO, right? So you're not one of
Mhm.
those things where you're jumping from strategy to strategy because you're afraid that if you don't do it, you're totally screwed.
So, for anybody that's just joining us, we are chatting a little bit about the importance of internal clarity and how it helps inform your business, and kind of this idea that more often than not, when we look at leadership within companies, we don't see people that are truly leading. We see a lot of people that are following fads or being reactive to fear that they see based off of the information that they're getting, especially in the world full of technology. My background in software sales, I've seen this play out so many times, that I think it's becoming an even more important conversation for us to have. So if you're here, you're joining us, you've got questions about any of the stuff that we're talking about, comments, we're going live because we want to interact with you. So throw them into the comments. We'll pull stuff in, answer questions, or kind of riff off of the ideas that you've got when it comes to how important this clarity piece is
Yeah.
to internal leadership.
And there's a comment prompt too. I would love just to know if you're here and you're live, do you feel like your business has internal clarity? When you're looking at the work that you do on a day-to-day basis, do you feel like you have clarity on the purpose of what you're doing? Because I think this is incredibly important. And then I know our audiences go from people who are executives to people who are in operations, and that obviously that clarity comes into what am I building this product for? Who am I, how am I building this service? People who are in sales. And I think sales is really important for clarity too. I think it's underappreciated how important purpose and clarity is for sales teams, because if you are a salesperson and you truly understand the mission of your company, it's so much easier to sell because you have that passion that you can deliver to your customers, and you can have an alignment with your customer. So you and your customer are both there for the same purpose and serving the same why. Where if you don't have that, what ends up happening is you just commoditize yourself and you sell X product or you sell Y service, instead of saying like, no, I'm here on a mission to help you have the most simple accounting system possible, because I know that accounting is a bottleneck for a lot of organizations, right? If you have that good mission, that was a really bad example. That was no. Let me actually rephrase that. We have a person in our network who runs a company that does contract negotiations, and they have a tool where basically they vet your contract and they say this is reasonable, it falls within common standards as far as like the things that are being asked for, and they kind of give their stamp of approval, so that as you take your contract, your services agreement over to your prospect, you can say this has been third party vetted, there's not unreasonable requests in here, let's move forward without having to go down this lengthy back and forth with legal teams. And they're very passionate about simplifying that legal process and making it really easy for companies to go through procurement. And it's not just like a product of theirs. They truly feel passionate about it. They come from the legal industry. They come from the software industry. So they're kind of combining these things together. And when they're out there marketing, they're out there selling, that passion comes through, that purpose comes through, and it makes people want to buy from them. And it makes their job more enjoyable too. So that's how I kind of think about this broader concept of purpose between operational and on the sales side too.
Yeah. So we have a question that I want to pull up here. Kind of what are some of the dangers of not building internal clarity? And when you take a look at an organization, there are tons of different people with different roles, right? You just brought up sales, for example, but there's also people that are involved in customer support, and you've got executives and people in IT. You brought up accounting with like a weird example there. So I'll bring them back into it. But everybody has their own set of responsibilities, their own incentive structure that they are looking out for. And there's like a trend right now that I made a video with this week that's like talking about like the cup is half empty, it's half full. And like, how would different people in your company respond to this idea of the cup being half full? And I was kind of playing a little bit of like, you're making fun of this idea of clarity and like this, how all of us look at our organization and our role through the lens of our own incentives and our own responsibilities. But when you don't have an overarching clear purpose of your company, people will get incredibly focused on their own incentives and their own their own requirements, as opposed to going back to what the company is supposed to be there for. So you brought up the idea of like having a strong purpose for the company in terms of what you're solving for the customer. That needs to be present at a high level so that it can then also filter down to every person that's working in each one of those individual roles, so that they can also be kind of all going in the same direction. And I always think of this as like somebody like, like your team rowing a boat. If everybody is rowing in a different direction, you're not going to go anywhere. But you have to have that purpose at a high enough level that everybody can kind of go back to that higher purpose and row in the same direction. And when you don't have a clear purpose that's established and allows each person to have kind of like an attachment to it, then you just end up with all of these people kind of focused on their own shit as opposed to working together as a team.
Hey, watch your language.
Sorry. And I'm moving my hands a lot because that's how I talk.
No, and I think a more simple way of saying that too is that as humans, as the fancy monkeys we are, we crave purpose, and we want to have a reason for doing anything that we're doing. And if your company doesn't have a good purpose to begin with, and you don't have that clearly articulated in the way your leadership team talks and the way it's brought down throughout your organization, people will make up their own purpose. And sometimes it's office politics. Sometimes it's just guarding their own little like piece of the puzzle, right? Where if you have a broader sense of purpose, then that gets articulated, and as you said, everyone's rowing in the same direction, which makes the business run much more effectively. But again, from a perspective of working at that business, it's much more enjoyable to be able to say, oh, I understand our purpose. I don't have to make up my own just to like make my day tolerable to get through, right? And there's always a little bit of that, right? It's never perfect. But I would say like it's the more you can have that clear purpose across your organization, the more it's going to help across the board. So I think that's an important thing to think about. Again, I'll say it too. If they think like if you have a clarity or not clarity in your business, I'd love to hear it in the comment section too. I think this is something that's really important. And even I'll give an example. At my last business was a web design company, and doesn't seem like anything too exciting, right? It's a web design company. You're building out websites for people. We did custom WordPress websites. But one thing I recognized fairly early on in the process was that the purpose we served was to build the best website possible for our customers and teach them how to use it and help them leverage it so that they can grow their business. And the website was not the deliverable. It was helping them grow their business by giving them something beautiful that they can be proud of, that's professional, that helps them win deals and win over clients. And we heavily lean into the fact that we're here to help marketing people be successful. We're here to help business owners be successful. And once I made that shift internally when I was selling, I sold so much better. And even beyond that, we started using that in our marketing messages and our sales messages. And then even how we delivered the process of building websites. It was, how are we here to help create a tool for them to be successful, not just deliver them some code and some graphics and call it a day. So again, that's a very simple example of how we do it. And in our current business and Roll Off Consulting, what we recognize, the problem that our customers face is that they're overwhelmed with digital strategy. They don't know where to start. They don't know what to do. And in the process, they chase shiny objects and they get FOMO. They don't take action, right? Or they take the wrong action. So our why now in our business is to make digital strategy simple and clear for them so they can take action in the right direction. And everything we do kind of bubbles up from that. So I think having that is a really nice way of kind of picturing this all together and making it clear how to work.
So earlier you mentioned the idea of authority and showing up online. So when we, like you and I here within Roll Off Consulting, we talk a lot about the concept of digital leadership. And to us, that means how do you show up internally as a leader with clarity, which obviously we're talking about today? How do you show up externally in the market as an authority and a leader in your space in order to bring in business and kind of respond to what we know has changed in the marketplace? And then we've already talked a little bit about this concept of continuous learning and how important personal growth is as a leader so that you can stay up to date with what's going on and kind of show up as an authentic leader. But when we take a look at clarity and this concept of really building out a strong purpose and sense of clarity within the business that everybody can attach to and interact with. How important is that clarity then when it comes to building online authority and being able to show up and create content that drives business?
Yeah, I mean, this is a cliche answer, but I think it's critical, right? If you have a clear purpose for your business and what you're doing, and you're able to articulate that externally to the market, people can grasp onto that, right? And they can say, "Oh, that's me," and they can buy that. Again, I'll use a personal example from my life. I drove I drove a Toyota Prius for a while, right?
Big
And
man in a little car.
yeah, I was a big man in a little car. And I bought that Prius because I wanted to drive a car that was fuel efficient. I liked the little hatchback aspect of it. And I was coming out of college and we had student loan debt, and the car was damn cheap to drive around. And I was in sales. So it worked out really well for me. And I like Toyota's model of just being like a super reliable, economical car. And that is the purpose of Toyota, is to produce safe, economical cars that like just are tanks as far as like the way they last. And so me as a buyer in the market, I bought into their why. I bought into their purpose. And it wasn't even that deep. This is not some sort of like, deep thing here. We're not saving whales. But it's one of those things that like I bought because of that. And that's how I identified, to buy that car. And that's true of any business though, right? Like we typically buy something, especially when it comes to more of a discretionary purchase or a non-commodity purchase. We buy things based on the fact that what we are buying aligns with what we're trying to do and the why behind what we're trying to do. And obviously Simon Sinek in his book Start With Why talks about this deeply. But there is a lot of truth to that. Or Apple's a prime example of that too. And they're a cliche example to use, but Apple's computers cost more than buying a Windows or a Linux-based setup that you could build yourself. Like it's probably twice the cost for the amount of power you get. But their philosophy, or at least previously their philosophy of being simple, easy to use, and geared towards more creative professionals, aligned with people who identified themselves as creative professionals who were looking for a tool to execute their craft. And so that's why Apple was so successful in basically dominating that market. So again, think about that for your business. Like what is that purpose? What is that deeper why that you can articulate out into the marketplace, and you will start to attract the right kind of customers.
So I think that there's also, I just completely lost my train of thought there for a minute. I was going to pick up on something and it dropped. This is live television, everybody. Wasting money on Apple products, James.
That's what I do. Yeah. Well, actually, behind me, you can see an Apple product. I've been a big fan of Apple products for a long time, just because of that Flossie, right? And again, this is where I struggle, because their latest iOS update was total trash, and I hate using it. But they always were one of those things where they built the software, they built the hardware, so it worked well together and it was effective together. And for my aging parents, I recommended they get iPhones because they were easier to set up than Androids were, right? And you get your Apple Cloud password or your Apple ID, and you can set it all up, and it's good to go across the entire ecosystem. There's not a bunch of things moving on. Again, questionable if that's still the case, but they are a good example of a company serving their purpose. And it's really, really important to externally articulate that, because again, you will get better customers. It'll be easier for them to identify themselves, but like you will actually get more profitable customers too. Because if your customers buy into the same philosophy and the same purpose that you do, and they understand that, they're more likely going to pay more, and they're actually going to be easier to work with too. So that's a really big thing that I've seen again and again and again in businesses, is that if they're able to articulate that, they're able to attract the right people to them because of that purpose, they're going to get more profitable sales going forward.
And I finally came back around to the idea of that I had before. But when we talk about strategy a lot within companies, a lot of times we'll hear things like, like management who's like, we need you to be more strategic, and like those types of conversations that happen. But when you're in an organization that's saying that they need you to be more strategic, but they don't have clarity, it's kind of like that's the cause behind the ability to not be strategic, because like as much as strategy is supposed to be your plan for execution, it also helps inform what things you should avoid and what things you shouldn't do. So when you look at like a company like Apple that has such a strong purpose, and there's many other companies, you mentioned Toyota, or like other organizations that have really, really strong purpose, that informs the decisions that their team makes on a day-to-day basis of, yes, I am going to do this, or I am not going to do this. I'm going to avoid this distraction, or I'm going to dive in here to like continue to help solve the problems of our customers. And, when it comes in, the reason that it reminded me was like the idea of like aging parents. Like you go into an Apple store, the idea is that their products are supposed to be easy to use, right? That's a part of their purpose. That's a part of their ethos as an organization. Well, the people that are there, the geniuses, are teaching like old people classes on how to use their devices. And you go in there at 10 a.m. on a Tuesday to get your phone fixed, and there's like in the corner of the room is a group of old people that are being taught how to use their electronics.
It even kind of smells like old people in the back part of Apple stores.
Maybe that's why Lefty doesn't like buying from Apple.
Whatever, he said something. So you're wasting your money on Apple products. And like honestly, you're probably right in some cases, right? I think there's honestly, more than anything, this just highlights the importance of purpose and why, right? Like I bought into that brand. I'm willing to pay more for it. And like I've said before, like I've built my own gaming PCs. I totally get the, having to have this massive upgrade up in price to get a bigger SSD, soldered into my machine that I can't remove and can't swap out. And like that is how they work, right? There's something said about that, but I also buy into their why, and increasingly less so, because they're kind of drifting from that in some of the ways they're making decisions. But previously, again, not to be like a Steve Jobs fanatic, but he did a fairly good job of actually sticking to a purpose and a plan and a why. And so he did a good job of that, and it showed in most of the products that he did. But I'm willing to pay a price for that, or pay a premium price for that. And that's why Apple's one of the most valuable companies in the world, is because they have a good purpose as far as how they're doing that. Where there's plenty of other, computer manufacturing companies that did not make it. My first PC ever was a Gateway computer, which is now out of business. I've had HP computers, which is now doing terrible, right? So there's tons of different, manufacturers out there, but I bought into the idea, like I like Apple products. So it's a why that, garners a premium price.
But going back to what you said, like they've known that they had this ethos of being the innovators, the ones that thought about stuff differently, which was very tied to Steve Jobs as like the leader with the strong purpose and clarity. Now, there's many people also that like, no, he was kind of an asshole and like unmovable in terms of so like don't necessarily adopt everything there, but he had that strong purpose and ethos for the company. But they have started to separate from that idea of being an innovator, and you're seeing other companies that are starting to bubble up that are doing some of that better, and they are seeing some questionable hits to sales and stuff like that when it comes to performance of some of their flagship products, and other things that have made it like less easy to use. Like they finally changed the charger because people were pissed off because it wasn't universal like every other phone out there, because they were trying to edge out competition as opposed to be innovative.
That was a European Union lawsuit that forced that.
Well, yeah, they didn't do it really. But there are things that have made them stray away from this like ethos of being innovative and like easy to use and like beautiful designs. And now the phones looked the same. They're not doing anything to make it look better. They're not doing anything to truly innovate on like their core product. And they're starting to see results dips in results because of that.
Right. Well, they took a guy who was a visionary and replaced him with a supply chain logistics guy, which is great for saving costs on supply chain logistics, but not so great for innovating. Lefty, if you're still here, if you're still on the live stream, I would challenge you to comment a product that you do pay a premium price for, right? Like I would guarantee there's something in your life where it's a hobby or something else that you purchase on a regular basis where you are like a brand, follower or like a lover of a brand that you pay your premium price for. I'd love to hear that. If you drop that in the comments, if you're still around, because I think all of us, Apple's like this lightning rod example because it's so prevalent a smartphone in our pocket, right? But all of us at different things in our lives, we are paying a premium for something because you can say it's branding, but also it's like, no, it goes beyond branding. It's like that purpose of the company and the why that their leadership team and their marketing team and their sales team puts out there, we buy into it. And probably a better way of saying it is that we align ourselves with them. So we're willing to pay more for it because of that. So again, if you're still here, or anybody else for that matter, if you want to comment, like I'd love to hear like what are the brands that you're willing to pay a premium price for, because of the fact that the company and its leadership team, what they stand for, is just something you align with. So I think that is something that when you look at the way that people spend nowadays, both in our personal lives and in the business world, a lot of the money that we spend is not a true necessity, right? Like there are very few things that are like true necessities in life or in business. And a lot of times we make decisions based on emotions and being like, oh, like I want that because I want what that's doing. Like I believe in that purpose. I want that outcome that company is focused on. So I'm going to buy their product, right? And a lot of times the products and services we complain about are the ones that we're forced to buy, and we don't actually buy into their product.
So James, I've got another question for you, and I think you do a nice job of summing this up. So I'm going to throw it to you. But like, if you're a leader, and you are recognizing like, okay, I don't have the same type of clarity that I should have in my business, or I'm not aligned with what my customers are looking for. What are like a couple of questions that you should be asking and working with your team side by side to figure out?
Yeah, I mean, the way that we consult our clients on this without getting too deep into it is, again, kind of how we opened the conversation today. Like, who's your customer? What problem do they have? And why does it matter? And how do you solve it? Right. So like basically it goes back to the customer. Like you're solving your customer's problem is the purpose, and uniquely solving it how you are uniquely able to, right? Is a big part of that. So a good like exercise for anyone to go through is look at your top accounts in your business. Look at the people who are paying you the most amount of money, right? So 80-20 principle. 20% of your customers typically provide 80% of your revenue. So identify those top 20% of customers. Go down, look through those customers. What are the commonalities? What are the trends you're seeing amongst those top customers who are your raving fans and love working with you? How do you serve them? What problems do they face? What do they value? What are the things they're looking for? And then how are you and your business uniquely seated to serve that problem for them? And then from there, then you can determine that bigger purpose, right? That why of what you're doing. What is that challenge that those best customers have? How are you solving it? Why does it matter? And then that's kind of how you build out that purpose. Again, it's deeper than that, but I think like if you can just do that exercise of just saying like, how do I serve my best customers? That's going to be very illuminating. And then as you go about your day, as you go about your week, and you're having discussions about how to change your product or how to change your service, or you're talking to your sales team about how they're positioning your product or service in the market. If you think back to that workshop or that exercise where you looked at that bigger problem for your top customers, it'll become crystal clear what you need to do. Your decisions will be easier to make. Your sales messaging will be easier too. If you go back to think about your customers, because the customers are the ones you're serving. That is truly the why is how do you serve your customers best?
So I think we're going to wrap up for today, but we are going to start coming live on a weekly basis. So if you are joining us, watching this later, you've got questions, comments, things that we should talk about tied to the idea of digital leadership, how to show up in the world, both internally and externally in a way that actually accomplishes shit. Not watching my language again, James. Shoot us a DM, comment on one of our videos, and we'll bring it forward in a future live. But for those of you that are with us right now still, thank you so much for joining us and for